And a very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Issues and Attitudes. My name is Jeff Owens, Interim General Manager at WEIU TV and Radio. My co-host is off today, Annalicia, but my guest today is Mr. Shane Rogers. He's a Lakeland College political science instructor. And welcome, Shane.
Thank you, Jeff. Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming over. Obviously, tomorrow is an important day in the state of Illinois and across a few other states, as it is election day, and so that's why we wanted to have somebody like you come over and talk about the importance of politics. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least take a second to talk about, we're in some crazy times right now, aren't we?
Yes.
Your thoughts on this coronavirus and the things that is happening that's really disrupting our day-to-day lives?
It really is somewhat of a disruption to everybody in all types of work environments, etc. I know at the college we had some meetings this morning. I know you've had some meetings here. And it's just an evolving situation that we're trying to keep up with.
And it seems like minute by minute things are changing, so we're trying to keep you updated as much as we can throughout this week here at WEIU. I guess before we get into why people should vote and the importance of just being the democracy that we are, tell us a little bit about your background and your history and how you got to Lakeland and things like that.
Okay. I come from Casey, Illinois, and graduated from Casey High School and went to Lakeland College. And while I was at Lakeland College as a political science major, I was fortunate enough to do an internship there with our congressman at the time, Glenn Pritchard, who was opening up a district office in Mattoon. And then after serving in that position in the local office, that happened to be out at the airport, we had an office out there, that summer in 1994 was able to go out to Washington, D.C. and get an internship experience out there as well. So it enabled me to get involved more deeply in politics and find out if it's really what I wanted to do, and I decided it was. Come back home and worked in a couple campaigns for the congressman, and then one of the staff members who I had interned under, Paul Black, had got a different job. And so I happened to be literally kind of in the right place at the right time, and became a staff assistant for a couple years. And then while I was doing that at the same time, started teaching, come back to Eastern, and also went to Eastern previously, and started working on my master's degree in political science. And not too long after that, started teaching some night classes at Lakeland, because I always knew I wanted to teach.
Yeah.
So I had both jobs at the same time and tried to find out which one I wanted to do more. It was made a little bit easier decision after Pritchard had ran for governor in '98 and wasn't successful. I worked for about 9 months for Congressman Phelps at the same time as working at Lakeland. And the one thing about working as a congressperson or for a congressperson or for the House in particular is every 2 years there's an election, which also means your job is kind of up too, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And Congressman Phelps wasn't successful in that election, and it was at that time that I made the decision to apply for a full-time job at Lakeland, and been there since the spring of '99.
Now, you always knew that politics or political science was your thing. What's the earliest, did you just know?
I did. I had a really good instructor in high school in my junior year, Bill Wyman, taught government, and he was just a great teacher, had a big influence on me. And also I was in the Boy Scouts as a young fella, and our council was Wabash Valley Council in Terre Haute, Indiana, and a man by the name of Ed Pease was involved in our council in a big way, and he had also been an Indiana state senator at the same time.
That name sounds familiar.
Yeah. He later served in the Congress at the same time as Congressman Phelps did, and they were on the same committee together. So it's really kind of interesting how it all come full circle. But I always knew that I was interested in that and enjoyed people and some of the problem solving. And once you get involved in at the local level, you start having people say, hey, you ought to run for this, or, you know. So I was able to start out the precinct committeeman level, when I was about 18, register people to vote. Ran for the township board in Casey and was on there for about 6 years and got some nice experience. Let's see. Later on, once I moved over to Coles County, served on the county board and some other boards for a little while, for about 4 years. So
there you go.
It's nice to have some textbook and practical experience, some good stories to tell the students.
That's true. We're talking to Shane Rogers today, and tomorrow's voting day. In case you're wondering, we have checked all the news wires and services that we have here, and as of this minute, the election tomorrow is on, and it appears that it's going to go full force tomorrow, beginning at 7 o'clock when polls open, until tomorrow evening. So in case you're wondering, you can vote tomorrow. And let's talk about the importance of everyone voting tomorrow here in Illinois. Shane? Excuse me. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, it's one of these things that some people just take religiously and say, yes, absolutely, you can't complain if you don't vote, which I understand, although we all do one way or the other. And other people, you have the other end of the spectrum say, well, my vote doesn't count. And my answer to that in the classroom is, well, okay, if everybody thought that way, then we couldn't have elections.
It'd be 1-to-1, right?
Right. Right. If everybody says, well, my vote doesn't count, so I'm not going to vote, well, you can't have an election. You just cannot. So it's almost like you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket, sort of thing. And plus, it's just, obviously your civic duty to, and for you to have your say. You're a part of this country. You pay your taxes. This is your opportunity.
Is there a way, I've thought about this ever, and I've talked to some people in the politics, is there a way to make it mandatory for people over 18 to vote? I know there's a way, but how would we make that happen if possible?
That's a very good question. There is, and some countries do. I've been fortunate enough to travel to some other countries, and Brazil was one of them. Brazil has mandatory voting. And the way they do it over in Brazil is basically, in order to get a job, we have to have a Social Security card here. They have to have a voting card. So to show that you have participated, because literally everything, the business hours, the minimum wage, what is connected to the citizenry and the voting. And so they want you to not only encourage you to be a part of that, but they don't tell you who to vote for, obviously, but you do have to vote in order to get government benefits, etc. So
that's interesting.
We could do that here. And like we said, we do with other things. Initially,
like census is mandatory.
Right. It would be a shock, but we do it in the census. We do it for benefits for governmental services, etc. Yeah.
When you teach your students and you're talking about convincing them, because students are the next generation of voters, and mostly at Lakeland, where they're right fresh out of high school, at least the majority of them are. What do you tell them? How do you teach them and say it's so important to vote? Here is 5 reasons to vote. What is the Shane Rogers way to get them to really grasp it?
Right. Good question, and it kind of changes with each class group,
I believe
of
that,
course.
Yeah.
And so really my way, and I don't know if it works because I'm not in the voting booth, but with them, but try and get them to first of all, try and find out what issues are important to them.
Yeah.
And they do like talking about that. Then you say, okay, what difference can you make in that? Well, you can go to board meetings. You can go to one thing that is so easy is everybody can vote. Mm-hmm. Everybody can vote. And so I start out at the local level, really what is something you would like to see changed? Even at the board level at Lakeland. Well, there's not enough parking. Well, we need more restaurants. Okay, you have a student representative here. You have a board. You have a board election, And once you kind of get them feeling like, okay, I do have a good idea here, and you encourage them, I think it just kind of builds.
That bring
from
out
there.
their passion in it, and they find something they like.
Something that they are interested in. Then, like any voter, that affects them, or a friend of theirs, or a family member, or something like that.
So you start out local. Now, do you get to the national politics in the presidential election in courses? And right now, obviously, and we don't want to take sides or talk about it, but obviously, we all know that President Trump has somewhat I don't want to say divided, but he's a really a guy that people are either they love him or they hate him, for lack of a better way. So when the students are talking about that in class, do you have to control it, or is it more just you just like to listen and take us through the process?
Yeah, it's students are a lot of times I find out that they're more often than not now very engaged, so which is nice. You don't have a lot of work to push to say, hey, what about this? Think about this. There you find yourself in some classes again saying, oh my goodness, okay, I got to keep up here, but they do have lots of information, actually more on the national level than the local level, I found. Or state level.
That's got to be a good sign, is it right? I mean, that's got to be a good thing that students are paying attention to the national level?
It is in some ways. So usually I have to kind of throttle them back and say, okay, we know what's happening on the national level, and sort through that and find out what's accurate and what's not. That's a big wrestle. These days, it's everybody's heard something, but what is actually accurate?
Yes. Do you in the class you're talking to students and they're kind of on the fence whether or not they should vote or not vote? Do you think it's your job as a teacher to remind them that they should exercise that civil right to vote and take us through that? Okay. But on the other process, do most of the students that take political science classes know that they should vote?
Yes, they do, and we do talk about the point of not voting is also also has an effect on the process. And we get into the discussion. A lot of people are over the past couple elections say, who did you vote? We don't ask them, but in hypothetical, are you voting for somebody, or are you actually voting against somebody? Yeah. Who are you supporting? Well, I didn't like this person, so I'm voting for that one. That's where a lot of students have found themselves, except for a few who already know who they're going to support. So we do try and encourage students to get involved in the process kind of ahead of time. For example, with this impeachment that went on. Lots of questions about that. So I said, well, let's get involved in the process. Let's have an assignment where we divide the country up into 5 regions. We've got 5 groups. You pick a region, you write that U.S. senator, that congressperson, and you ask them about, why they voted however way they did on impeachment. We'll mail them in. Normally, we might not get a response if you're from Illinois and you're writing to a senator from California.
Yeah.
But because there is a national election, they want to explain, here's what I think, here's what I don't.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so the student was actually involved in that process ahead of the time, and we haven't yet. We just mailed them off, so we'll see what we get back. Yeah. And I think then they feel invested, like, okay, I'm part of this, and I am going to go vote one way or the other. At least that's the hope.
Obviously, we started the show off talking about this, COVID-19 coronavirus that's going on. Do you think that affects people going out tomorrow? I mean, you're talking about, for lack of a better way to say it, there's people in and out, which they're trying to get us not to do right now.
Right.
But we are going to vote. The elderly vote more than the young,
right,
and they're the most susceptible to this. So are you concerned that we may have a low turnout tomorrow in Illinois?
It's one of those things that political scientists always look at after the fact and try and say what the effect was. But I think right now people are concerned, but they also I don't anticipate a low turnout, but no evidence to prove that. But it seems like people, if they're going, I still see people going shopping and some other things. This isn't going to be all that different. You're not in there very long. You're not,
Yeah, you're not spending hours in there. Well, the good thing about Coles County, you can get in and out most voting places in just rather a few minutes usually.
Right. I'm sure it will have an impact of some sort, but how big? I don't think we're at that point yet where people are just locked down in their houses, and hopefully we won't be.
Yeah.
And there's another reason to vote if you don't like some things that are going on, or you do like some things, you do support certain things. Now's your opportunity.
I put on the list to ask you a little bit about the census, because one of the things that we've really been talking about here for the past probably 4 or 5, maybe even 6 months on issues and attitudes is the importance of a census. And I don't know how much that plays into what you do, but I know it's mandatory. I know it's important. Talk about the Shane Rogers view on why people need to get their census thing in. And most of it came to Coles County this week, so you can get on that right now.
Yeah, I got mine as well. And it is absolutely, you could not emphasize it more, critical to the process. Absolutely critical. Every single thing that we have in our system of government is based upon population. Every single thing. And population, whether it's not only U.S. citizens, it's population. You know, there's all sorts of different people who are here working and whatnot, and they're counted. And our whole system of representative democracy is based upon that. The number of representatives we get, funding from states. I mean, everything. So it's absolutely crucial that we do it. That's why they emphasize it so much.
I want to also ask you a little bit as a political science instructor about border control and open borders versus closed borders, and just your in general thoughts. Does that play into what you teach, or is that something that doesn't come into effect?
It does, and especially here in the last few years.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting when you look at how our policy has evolved, and when people pay attention to it. It used to be years ago that you could show up, and I mean years and years ago, 1800s. You could show up, get off the boat, and then you're welcome as a member of that community. You're going to be taking part in that community, working, etc. So they said, okay, you can have a vote. You could vote the next day if it was that election, but it wasn't as big of a concern for certain reasons in certain places, and in some places it is more of a concern than others. So it's such a huge, big country. We do talk about that because you don't want abuse of the system either. There's got to be a happy balance. But with so many different counties and different methods of the way they do their elections, very, very little in the Constitution, U.S. Constitution, about procedures and practices of voting. Mostly it's encouraging people to vote. Expanding the right to vote. But time, place, manner of elections, all left to state and local governments. Mostly it's the federal laws that have protections for voting. The details are worked out later on. So, it has a big impact. And again, there's an issue.
Yeah. Well, have you got a chance to check out the women's suffrage thing? I know Matt Toon has had the displays on right now up at the train station in the depot.
I haven't had an opportunity to go up there, but I want to. 100 years.
Yeah, and we just had those folks on a couple weeks ago, and I just thought of that when you said about the voting and how things have changed. It's been 100 years ago, women couldn't vote. Now they can, and
right.
So it's interesting times. And again, we're talking to Shane Rogers, Lakeland College instructor. Tomorrow is voting day, and again, the news is that everything is open tomorrow. Polls are open in Coles County, so go exercise your right to vote on whatever side you decide to choose. What's the best and worst thing about being a college professor? A fun question, but a tough one as well.
Oh, gosh. I heard somebody joke years and years ago in high school. They said, well, the best thing about being a high school teacher is June, July, and August. But, I mean, some people laugh at that. Some people don't, but it is a joke. I literally enjoy every minute of it. The changing atmosphere with one student to the next, one classroom to the next, everything could be completely different. So, and I enjoy people. I find people interesting. I find their ideas interesting, and I learn as much as they do. Hopefully as much as they do. Yeah. I think sometimes I probably learn more, but it's just invigorating to be around people, and obviously there's a lot of stuff that I just don't know that young students help me with all the time. A lot of technology, obviously.
They know all that.
But just a lot of bright students out there that really when people say, well, they kind of keep you young.
Yeah, that's one thing I agree with at Easter. I think they do keep us young.
What they mean.
On the backside, is there anything the worst part about being a teacher, besides grading the papers, you can't have the easy cop out.
Yeah, right. Gosh, that's a tough one in some ways. I guess.
Just keep mine. This is what I was thinking. Keeping the course fresh.
Yeah.
Because you get used to teaching a certain way, and that way kind of goes with the times. But as times change, you have to change your coursework. I mean, do you find that to be
kind of keeping up
with it?
For example, it kind of hits me in a little bit of a frustration away. There's so much coming all at once, and especially if you have a 50-minute class, it just zips by, and you think, okay, that went so fast. Did we covered so much? I hope they're not just confused, but because they were all in, it was a good class, all involved, and a lot of questions, and they want to come back, but then you think, okay, well, did we hit on what we needed to?
Yeah.
So there's a fine balance there.
I don't know about you, but I find out sometimes I walk out of the class thinking, man, I think I really had a great class. It's like an athlete, I had a great game, and sometimes I walk out of the class thinking, man, I was terrible today.
Yeah.
Do you have that?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, good. I'm not the only one.
No, not at all.
How many classes do you normally teach in a semester? Are you 3, 4, 5? How does that work at Lakeland?
Usually about 5.
Oh, really? Okay.
15 credit hours, and the 3 credit hours is a minimum load. So you at least 5, I should say, 5 to 8 a semester. How
do you try and help students who are struggling? I mean, what is that Shane Rogers way? You see a kid who's not doing in class, not engaged. Do you try to pick them up, or how?
I do. I have to be honest that I never really liked school myself, and so I empathize with that. I understand. For somebody who would struggle, there has to be, at least for me, and I've been able to learn from the students, you have to find, a way that applies to them. And it may not have anything to do with the textbook or how you're thinking of it. So I try to get as much input from them themselves, And these all have to do with political variables we talk about in class, where they're from, geography, their own background, their education. Why are you here? What do you want to do? I'm lucky and feel fortunate. One of the other good things about government is it applies to everything. It's so easy for me to say, okay, well, there's FCC regulations that have to do with radio. There's, ag students. There's all kinds of things.
I broke my own law. I had my phone on. I apologize.
And so trying to find out what their interest is again, and then tailor some part of the government that has to do with that.
The other thing about political science, I mean, we think about it being government, local, national, state, but obviously foreign policy comes into this too. So what are the other foreign policy things that you get a touch on in some of your political science courses?
Right. Well, at Lakeland, currently we offer American national government, state and local government, and an international relations class. The international relations class typically is sort of the smaller class because it's kind of a sub-discipline.
Yeah.
But again, we get into, we're part of the world community, obviously, and a leader, and there's emerging nations that change a lot of our laws. We talk about a lot of natural things, the environment, etc., and this virus is something, along with, like, in 2009, banking crisis, hit overseas before it come here. And so we have to be tied in and understand other countries to understand our own, not only our history, but every day.
People are on the fence right now to vote. How would Shane Rogers convince them to say, yes, go out and vote tomorrow?
I would say think of the issue that is most important to you, that is most concerning to you, whether it's something to do with health, family. Everybody has issues with that. Income, jobs. There's a huge, wealth gap, income, etc., or property, or prescription drugs. Everybody, think about what is most important to you, and know and believe that you have an impact in that. And again, think if you were the only person voting, and they said you have to vote to make a difference on it. Nobody else was voting, and your vote is going to make the difference. That's how I think, because we've had several issues where it comes down to one vote does make a difference.
Have you ever had somebody that doesn't matter what you say, they're going to not vote tomorrow or not vote in November?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you just eventually give up, or do you try to still talk, hey, you need to vote, Joe?
Well, I tell them, your not voting has an impact as well. There's no doubt about that. No doubt in at all. Now, what that impact will be, negative or positive on you, you don't know.
The great unknown.
You don't know. So,
yeah, interesting. The one thing that I'm still fascinated and I don't understand, and we're down to a couple minutes left, is bills becoming law. That you can vote on a bill, then it goes to a process before it actually becomes a law, and it can just sit on someone's desk forever.
Yeah.
Talk about the process of that and whether or not you believe that there should be some type of change in that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've gotten way far afield of perfecting almost the art of non-governing, and it comes with, government does overreach, of course, in some areas, and in other areas it's just stymied. You got to have a proper mix. The bipartisanship always works, half a loaf, and it's as bad as partisanship is and keeps people from, some people are fighting to keep things from being done, and some people are fighting to get things done. There's so much more that they do have bipartisanship on that we're used to. The lights are on, the water is running, that the mail is running, that in other countries that doesn't happen. So you just continue that and in other things,
That's a good answer. Okay. A couple rapid fire questions here. Favorite politician you like to study?
Oh goodness, that's a. Let me come back to that.
All right.
one.
We talked about your high school teacher. Your favorite high school teacher again was
Bill Wyman.
Do you have any hobbies? Shane Rogers have a hobby?
Oh yeah, I enjoy woodworking, music of most kinds, reading.
What's your go-to album? I had to ask for Ramin.
My go-to album.
The number one album.
One again. I like Bruce Springsteen, so.
I don't know that.
Yeah, gosh, any of those.
Summer vacation plans? You go anywhere this summer?
Oh, well,
or do you want to go anywhere this summer? I should have rephrased that one.
I do like to travel, and I encourage students and people to travel and save to travel if you can at all. In most times, because it gives you as much information about your own country as it does others. So I'm looking into it, but haven't made any plans just yet.
Are you reading any current books right now?
I am.
You got 20 seconds.
I'm trying to think of the name of it. Oh, I just watched a series on Amazon called The Hunters, and they mentioned a book called The Paperclip. It's about Nazi hunters.
Okay.
Paperclip conspiracy,
cool.
I think.
Well, thanks so much for coming in today. We appreciate it. Don't forget to vote tomorrow.
Thank you.
Everybody, this is WEIU.